A killer was arrested. Police had blood evidence. They had motive. They had opportunity. They had everything they needed to convict. But one critical mistake by police would set a killer free and spark a national debate about justice, rights, and the American legal system. This is the story of how a technicality freed a killer. This is courtroom drama. In May 2005, Los Angeles was shaken by a brutal crime. A woman was found stabbed multiple times in her apartment. The wounds were severe. The attack was vicious. Police immediately began their investigation, interviewing neighbors and reviewing security footage. Within hours, they identified their prime suspect, Maria Hernandez, a 34-year-old woman with a criminal history. Police believed they had found their killer, but they needed evidence. They needed proof. They needed something concrete to take to court. When police arrived at Maria's apartment building, they were determined. They had a mission. They were going to find the evidence they needed to convict her. But what happened next would become a textbook example of how police can violate constitutional rights and how those violations can set criminals free. The officers approached Maria's apartment door. They didn't have a search warrant. They didn't have judicial authorization. They didn't have a signed order from a judge. But they believed Maria was guilty. They believed she was the killer, and they believed they would find evidence inside her home. So they entered without permission, without a warrant, without legal authorization. Inside the apartment, police officers began their search. They looked everywhere. They searched drawers. They searched closets. They searched under the bed. They searched the bathroom. They searched the kitchen. They were thorough. They were determined. And they were looking for anything that could connect Maria to the crime. And then they found it. Blood on Maria's hands, on her clothing, in her apartment. The evidence was there. The physical evidence that connected her to the victim. The police believed they had solved the case. They believed they had found their killer. They believed they had the evidence they needed to convict. Maria Hernandez was arrested. She was charged with murder. The case went to trial. The prosecution presented their evidence, the blood evidence, the motive, the opportunity. Everything seemed to point to Maria's guilt. But the defense had a different argument. The defense had a constitutional issue. The defense had a problem that would change everything. The defense argued that the search was illegal. They argued that police had no right to enter Maria's apartment without a warrant. They argued that the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution had been violated, and they were right. The Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches, and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. In simple terms, this means police cannot search your home without a warrant. They cannot search your property without legal authorization. They cannot violate your privacy without a judge's permission. The Founding Fathers understood something crucial. They understood that government power must be limited. They understood that citizens must have protection against unreasonable government intrusion. They understood that your home is your castle, and the government cannot simply enter without permission. This is why the warrant requirement exists. This is why police must go to a judge and explain why they need to search a specific location. This is why a judge must review the evidence and decide whether there is probable cause. This is why the warrant process protects all Americans. In Maria Hernandez's case, police did not follow this process. They did not get a warrant. They did not go to a judge. They did not explain their probable cause. They simply entered her apartment without legal authorization. This was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The defense presented this argument in court. The judge listened. The judge reviewed the facts. The judge made a decision. The judge ruled that the search was unconstitutional. The judge ruled that police had violated Maria's Fourth Amendment rights. The judge ruled that all evidence obtained from that illegal search was inadmissible in court. This is called the exclusionary rule. It's a legal principle that states if police violate your constitutional rights to obtain evidence, that evidence cannot be used against you in court. It doesn't matter how damaging the evidence is. It doesn't matter how clearly it proves guilt. If it was obtained illegally, it cannot be used. The exclusionary rule exists for a reason. It exists to protect citizens from government overreach. It exists to ensure that police follow the law. It exists to make sure that constitutional rights are not violated with impunity. Without the exclusionary rule, police could enter any home, search any property, and violate any right, as long as they found evidence of a crime. The exclusionary rule prevents this. The exclusionary rule says, if you violate constitutional rights, the evidence is inadmissible. So the judge ruled the blood evidence inadmissible. The judge ruled that the evidence could not be used at trial. The prosecution lost their most crucial evidence. Without the blood evidence, they had no case. Without the physical evidence, they could not prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Maria Hernandez was acquitted. The victim never received justice. The killer walked free. The public was outraged. How could a killer be set free on a technicality? How could constitutional procedures override justice? How could the law protect criminals instead of victims? These are legitimate questions. These are questions that many Americans ask when they hear about cases like this. These are questions that reflect a fundamental tension in the American legal system, the balance between justice and rights. On one hand, we want to see guilty people punished. We want to see justice served. We want to see victims receive closure. We want to see criminals held accountable for their actions. But on the other hand, we also want to protect individual rights. We want to ensure that government power is limited. We want to ensure that innocent people are not falsely convicted. We want to ensure that constitutional protections are not eroded. The Founding Fathers understood this tension. They decided that protecting constitutional rights was more important than convicting criminals. They decided that a government that could violate rights to solve crimes was more dangerous than criminals themselves. This is why the Fourth Amendment exists. This is why the exclusionary rule exists. This is why Maria Hernandez was released, even though evidence suggested her guilt. Cases like Maria Hernandez's are not unique. They happen regularly in the American legal system. Police make mistakes. Police violate rights. And when they do, criminals are released. This is frustrating. This is infuriating. But it is also necessary. Because the alternative, a government that can violate rights to solve crimes, is worse. The Fourth Amendment protects all of us. It protects you. It protects me. It protects everyone. If police can enter your home without a warrant, they can enter anyone's home without a warrant. If police can search your property without authorization, they can search anyone's property without authorization. Maria Hernandez's case reminds us of this fundamental truth. Constitutional rights are not just for criminals. Constitutional rights are for everyone. And protecting those rights, even when it means releasing guilty people, is essential to a free society. Subscribe to Courtroom Drama for more cases that changed America. Thank you for watching.